I have a kind of a unique approach to this. I'm actually completely a preventive cardiologist, which really doesn't exist. It's really a cornerstone of medicine that has been far underutilized.
This is Shadow Me Next with Dr. Jeffrey Boone. Dr. Boone, thank you so much for joining us on Shadow Me Next today. Absolutely incredible what you are doing in preventive cardiology. Cannot wait to discuss it with you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So let's start at the beginning. Dr. Boone, you are a cardiologist, have been doing this for a number of years. Has your practice in cardiology looked the same since you started working, or has it shifted over the last number of years?
Yes, I have a kind of a unique approach to this. I'm actually completely a preventive cardiologist, which really doesn't exist. It's really a cornerstone of medicine that has been far underutilized. The typical board certified cardiologist is really learning procedures like how to manage emergency rooms and cath labs and angiograms and pacemakers and stents. And that's a whole different skill set than I have. So I actually went to medical school for the only reason that I went in the 70s was to prevent heart disease. Well, everyone sort of thought I was crazy because they were just now learning how to help fix heart disease, which I thought that's fabulous, takes a lot of skill. So I would say in the world of cardiology, which I'm not the usual typical cardiologist, I've been pursuing for, getting close to half a century, the prevention of heart disease. Now, when I first started, even doctors of all levels were not talking about lifestyle at all. And in the 70s, there were no good medicines to use that were actually comfortable to take to prevent these diseases. So I sort of went in it initially to be a voice because I saw how powerful the degree of MD is, that rather than being someone who counsels for hours and hours about diet and nutrition and exercise, which is very important, but there are many people that had those skills already. I thought just having the voice of an MD would empower them. And so that is how my career began to develop. And my wife, before we were married, was the first one that kind of suggested that I should go to med school because I was dreaming and talking about our futures. And she eventually became a lawyer, me a doctor, but neither one of us was doing much of anything rather than just surviving at basic jobs at that point. I'd already gotten a master's in exercise physiology, so I was always working in exercise facilities. In those days, there were no health clubs. There was no Lifetime or Planet Fitness. There were just big YMCA buildings in downtown major cities of America. And those were sort of the focal point of fitness, basketball, racquetball, squash, things like that. So that's where I worked and began pioneering in the mid 70s, exercise being a medical tool actually to evaluate your heart. And then Paul Dudley White had made Dwight Eisenhower exercise after his heart attack. And that was very revolutionary. People used to think you just should lie still after a heart attack. And so the YMCA became a focus of post cardiac event rehab. And I was the exercise person that led the rehab in a place of Des Moines, Iowa. And that's where I met my wife. So I was thinking about getting a PhD in exercise physiology, but I met at the time a guy named Ken Cooper who pioneered aerobics and was sort of the father of jogging almost. And I got to meet him and he said, PhD in exercise physiology would be great. And this was even before the Los Angeles Olympics long, long ago. He said, if you can be an MD, you'll just have more power, flexibility. You won't have to ask anybody's permission to do much. And so I said, okay, where do I sign up? Because I'd never even thought of being a doctor. I was like 27 and my wife had first suggested it. And I thought you could just go down and sign up, and where do I start? And I found out that if I interviewed, nobody was interested in my ideas about preventive cardiology. But fortunately, the University of Iowa didn't interview. So they didn't know that I wanted to prevent heart disease. And so I got into Iowa. It was a miraculous entry. But my whole medical school career, I was one of the few doctors that knew exactly what I wanted to do. Most of the time, you're getting education, whether it's in physician assistant school or medical school, whatever, you're sort of learning the language of the profession. And then you decide whether you want to go into eyes or skin or heart or bowels or whatever you want to go into. But I knew right off what I wanted. So every course, whether it be histology, biochemistry, nephrology, I would always look at what are the preventive aspects of it? What could exercise and nutrition do? And so that continued through that process. Got an internal medicine residency and really totally focused on preventive cardiology, which still didn't really exist. And then the program I was in now in Portland, Oregon, Nike had just invented jogging shoes. You know, it was just getting started. And so Portland was a good athletic running type of a city. And so all the doctors there were very fatherly to my interests. And so even during my residency, I was the head of cardiac rehab, and I would do, you know, articles and write papers on exercise and the dialysis patients. So I was fortunately in a lot of places that sort of fostered my interests. I never really actually did interventional cardiology or the typical cardiology track because it was really teaching me everything that I wanted to prevent. We have plenty of guys that can do stents and take care of ERs. And so I sort of pioneered this profession that didn't exist, asymptomatic preventive cardiology. So that's a bit of the background of how I got into this, and unfortunately just continued to try to pursue the dream with really no jobs really focused on that. From healthcare systems to insurance companies, nobody was interested in prevention. They thought they were, and they would advertise that they were, but they really weren't at the very highest level. And then the imaging of the heart, the imaging of plaque, and the medications, just every 2 or 3 years over the last 40 years, just incredible array of medicines that have moved cardiology now mainly into primary care. Like, as I think the actual disease of heart disease is every specialty is involved. And that's where a physician assistant, nurse practitioner, family physician, internist should actually be leading the charge. And cardiologists are only there for our failures. Meaning that if we aggressively redefine significant and aggressive, we've tended to think of significant disease as one that's involved with chest pain or severe blockages. But actually, in our case, any detection of plaque, atherosclerosis, in our world at the Boone Heart Institute is viewed as the detection of cancer. And obviously, you don't tell anyone, well, you've got just a little bit of cancer, so let's wait until it gets really big and then we'll take care of it. But that's what we do in heart disease. Number one, we don't measure heart disease. And number two, we don't treat it aggressively until it's symptomatic.
Oh my gosh. So many mind-blowing things that you just mentioned right there. Absolutely incredible. I want to dive into three. There were three things that you mentioned, and I want to make sure that we really push into a couple of these. First being, I am just infatuated with the idea that you sought medicine really as more of a platform so that you could do what you needed to do. I think a lot of people go into medicine hoping medicine will tell them what they should be doing with their life, right? For you, you knew what you needed, and you knew that medicine would give you that ability, and becoming an MD, that was going to be the road for you. Being a pioneer is very difficult when your ideas are going against the grain or perhaps a little unique. Were you ever discouraged? Did you ever think, well, maybe I have the wrong idea in all of this. Maybe this is silly. Maybe I'm thinking incorrectly, not just differently. And how did you move past that?
Very good question. And you put it very well. I've never thought of that before, but I used medicine as a platform to get where I wanted to go as opposed to the reverse. So interesting. Yeah. And so always everybody was kind of intrigued with what I was doing, but there were a lot of naysayers. Oh, exercise is going to help. Who cares if you lower cholesterol? You know, it was pretty easy to be a decade ahead of whatever was going on with like at the University of Iowa, where I was in med school, they were just beginning to invent CT scans. And an interesting fact is the first inventor of the CT scan was a guy named Geoffrey Hounsfield from London, and he was funded by the extra money that the Beatles were making in the music world. They were looking for something to invest in, and so they invested in Hounsfield. He developed the CT scan, and now I'm at the University of Iowa And it was still at the end of the time when you would do exploratory surgery to find out about
Oh,
something. And now you turn on a CAT scan and you know exactly what's going on. So I was there with
wow.
just the beginning of CT scans. So that was kind of amazing. But everybody at the med school, I'd say, I I'm going to try to prevent heart disease. And
Hmm.
they all thought it was kind of interesting. And then I was pretty good at just being focused and
Yeah.
being passionate about it. And so it was hard to talk that down. But then another thing that's developed in our work at the Boone Heart Institute, one of our core corporate values is called humble confidence,
Mm.
meaning that I would always double check, as you say, my theories, my thoughts, what could be possible, and really listen to naysayers or critics, and never really got discouraged, but would always reassess the data. And I would often say, no, they're wrong. I think we could prevent this disease. And then as every new drug began to develop, oh my gosh, now we've got a safety net. So I always kind of figured your lifestyle is a bit like a trapeze act. And
Mm.
you want to get very good at the trapeze. When you fall off, though, you ought to land on a safety net. And we had
Mm.
very few safety nets. And that's where the medicines come in. I'm happy if you lose weight, but let's get you on a diabetic medicine while you're losing weight. Or I'm happy
Mhm.
that you're
Mhm.
exercising to lower your cholesterol, but let's get on a cholesterol medicine to be a safety net if you fail, because every meal is a new challenge. And so that humble confidence, I think, got me through the next 4 decades of, and then as I got older and older, more of the things that I had been sort of pioneering in thought in my lectures and other things began to come true.
Mhm.
So now I'm so old now that many, many things have come true. And so now, at what could be the tail end of my career, I'm being viewed with, wow, you knew this 30 years ago. And so
Mhm.
I've gone from being capital C crazy to lowercase c crazy cool. Because
Love
a
that.
lot of even world leaders are saying, my gosh, he's been doing this for 30 years and we've just now proven he was right. And, so very humbly, though, not to say I told you so. And then if I'm worth my salt, what we're doing today should be 10 years ahead of what's happening even now.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
that's sort of how I weathered the discussions, the criticisms over the year. But it's usually pretty logical. The other thing I did is in law, you're sort of innocent until proven guilty.
Mhm. Mhm.
But in medicine, we make things guilty until we prove them innocent. So it
True.
takes 30 years to prove that exercise is good for you, or 30 years to prove that smoking is bad for you, when you could ask any 10-year-old and they could have told you the answer. But it took decades for the statistics to actually prove those things.
It does seem a bit backwards, and I'm sure your wife, who is a lawyer, would probably giggles at us and thinks, medicine is quite reverse a lot of times. I love the humble confidence that you've described, but I also like the fact that you said you listen to the naysayers. I think a lot of people say, well, tune them out, don't listen to them, ignore them, ignore them. But really, if we listen to them with humble confidence, like you said, it's not a discouraging thing. It's a push to investigate further, right? Okay, well,
Yes.
perhaps they're right. That's fantastic, and I'm so glad that you pushed through and really have pioneered this whole field. Medicine has advanced. We've talked about the medicines that are available now, the GLP-1s, all of that. It's incredible what medicine has done, and you've seen the lifestyle movement really advance as well, right? I mean, gosh,
Yes.
anywhere from like the post in my YMCA to the invention of jogging shoes. I mean, you've seen major advances. Are we in a good place right now in preventive cardiology? Have we arrived? Is there more to do?